Good afternoon, distinguished guests, panelists, and valued partners. My name is Lisa Ansell, and I'm the Director of Academic Programming at the USC Kasdan Institute. On behalf of the USC Kasdan Institute, Chapman University, the Irvine Company, and Southern California Gas, it is my privilege to welcome you to today's joint event, Can Southern California Afford Its Future? We gather at a critical juncture for our region, united by a shared concern for the future stability and prosperity of Southern California. Southern California faces an unprecedented housing crisis. The ability to afford a home has become elusive for countless families across our communities. The annual household income needed to qualify for a mortgage on a modest California home rests at a staggering $237,000 in 2025, which is more than twice the state's median household income. In Southern California, recent data shows that fewer than 15% of residents can afford the median-priced home. These stark numbers are not just statistics, they represent real people, families, and futures. Alarmingly, the cost of housing has far outpaced wage growth throughout California. Over the past decade, while median home prices have soared, wage increases have lagged far behind. This widening gap has created a barrier to homeownership for entire generations, impacting young professionals, working families, and retirees alike. The consequences reverberate through our schools, businesses, and civic life, threatening the very fabric of our communities and stifling entrepreneurship and innovation. The delta between median household income and the income required to have a chance at homeownership in our state represents decades and layers of policy failures that manifest themselves in entrenched exclusionary zoning, opposition to development of missing middle and multifamily housing that are effectively pricing out the working families and community heroes, such as our teachers, law enforcement, and nurses, whose vital presence is essential to continuity and progress. As today's panels explore the conditions that led to the extreme levels of housing affordability that we are facing, as well as possible pathways forward, we are deeply grateful for the leadership and scholarship of Professors Joel Kotkin and Marshall Toplansky of Chapman University, whose partnership with the USC Kasdan Institute has made tonight's event possible, and to Mahnaz Asghari, Associate Director for the Center of Demographics and Policy, for working with me to bring the vision of today's event to fruition. Their commitment to rigorous research and meaningful dialogue is vital as we seek solutions to this complex challenge. We likewise extend our sincere thanks to the Irvine Company and Southern California Gas for their support. Your dedication to the community and to innovative responses to the housing crisis is both valued and essential. We are honored to be joined by an outstanding group of panelists whose expertise and perspectives are critical to tonight's discussion. While our distinguished panelists will be introduced in greater detail by the moderators of our two discussions today, I would like to briefly introduce them and welcome them to our event. We are joined today by Carla Lopez del Rio, Community Development Executive, leader in homeownership, financial wellness, and policy innovation at the Principle of Connections Consulting. Elizabeth Hansberg, urban planner and policy advocate, co-founder and director of People for Housing Orange County and Orange County YIMBY. Roger Hobbs, president and CEO of the R.C. Hobbs Company and trustee professor at Chapman University with over 40 years in real estate development. Wendell Cox, principal of Demographia, senior fellow at Unleashed Prosperity, and former member of the Los Angeles County Transportation Commission. Joel Farkas, founder of Fruition Communities, with expertise in energy, real estate development, and water management. Arik Kasdan, real estate developer, investor, and philanthropist. Kasdan Properties has built more than 90,000 multifamily units, including landmark projects in Los Angeles. Bruce Phillips, professor of sociology and Jewish communal studies at the University of Southern California and Hebrew Union College, and senior research fellow at the USC Center for Religion and Civic Culture. And finally, Mott Smith, chairman of the Council of Infill Builders, CEO and co-founder of Amped Kitchens, and principal at Civic Enterprise. Mott also teaches real estate development at USC. Thank you to each of our panelists for leading and lending your insights, expertise, and potential solutions to this urgent issue. Your contributions will help illuminate the path forward. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Stephen Ames, Executive Director of the Alexander E. Hayden School of Real Estate at the George L. Argyros College of Business and Economics at Chapman University. Welcome, Stephen. Stephen Ames has nearly 4 decades of experience in commercial real estate investment with leading firms. He began with 6 years at Grubb & Ellis, followed by 7 years at the Cole Company, and most recently spent 26 years in institutional investments at Affinius Capital. Thank you all, and welcome, Stephen.
Well, hello, everyone. I want to wish you all a happy holiday season. It's coming fast, isn't it? And it's great that you're all here on a Sunday afternoon. Much appreciated. As I was just introduced, my name is Stephen Ames, and I'm the new executive director of the Alexander E. Hayden School of Real Estate at Chapman University. I started in May. After a 40-year career in investment, commercial real estate investment world. And it's been very rewarding for me. I retired in April of 2024, and this opportunity came along. And I saw it as an incredible opportunity to give back a bit, kind of try to share my experiences, contacts, relationships, knowledge with the next emerging group of leaders coming up in the commercial real estate business. And it's been really interesting and challenging for me to get into the academic world, but I'm loving it so far. I can tell you, after a career in the institutional investment world, that research is a huge part of that world. My 26 years at USAA Real Estate, we always had a research department. We always had a head economist, and every decision we ever made on behalf of our investors were informed by research and economics, and we always wanted to have a reason and a rationale for doing whatever we were doing. That's why we're excited about transitioning the Center for Demographics and Policy to the Hayden School of Real Estate, because research and real estate are so intertwined. And this move really aligns the school's focus on housing and real estate and economic forces that are shaping our communities. So we're thrilled to have Joel and Marshall as part of our platform. It's a perfect place for them to be, and we're trying to promote what they do every day. So I can tell you that I agree with Joel Kotkin, who said housing is the critical issue of our time. And I do believe that. I think housing is an essential part of the American dream. And there's a very large part of our society that is being sort of limited in the American dream because they can't participate in this critical part of our economy because of various factors. Every region is different. Southern California is an acute problem, and Orange County an acute problem in that area. And the facts were just presented to you. You're going to hear more about it. But I agree that it's a critical issue, and we do have to solve it because it has a lot of unintended consequences in terms of people's mental health and their sort of feeling a part of what society is doing versus maybe feeling that they can't get and achieve what their parents achieved for the first time in our society. So I'm excited about today's topic. I really want to hear more what everyone has to say about it. And with that, I will conclude and just bring up the executive director of the Center for Demographics and Policy, Mr. Joel Kotkin.
And I'm going to be really brief because we're a little behind schedule, and Lisa did us a favor by introducing everyone, so I won't have to do that. But I totally agree with Steve. I think, first of all, we're thrilled to be involved with the Hayden School. We're also, I think that this is a huge issue, as he suggested, and it's having political effects, as you might have noticed in New York recently. This housing issue is very complicated. I think there are a lot of different ways to solve it. But what I'd like to start off with is the guy who's probably taught me more about housing than anyone is Wendell Cox. Wendell, by the way, did do about 2 years at USC on the track team.
Yeah.
He decided he wasn't going to be a track star and went somewhere else. But basically, he has done more in terms of affordability. We published his housing affordability survey, and it has gotten hundreds of millions and even over 1 billion views.
Wow.
More than anything that any of them. Like we say, I've had 12 books, and I don't think I got close to 1 billion readers. So I think that he's probably the leading expert on just the basic economics. So what I asked him to do was to do, I don't know, those of us who are old enough to remember Dragnet, it was sort of like the Joke Friday thing, just the facts, man. And so he's going to give us just the facts. So, Wendell?
Wendell is a native of Los Angeles, and his family's been here since before the conquistadors.
Well, in my 5-member family, including my ex-wife, all of us were born within walking distance of City Hall, which is to give you an idea how old we must be at this point.
Move this up
Oh,
a
let's
little
see
so
here.
make sure no one loses a word here.
I'm going to go through a few slides here and going to try to prove to you that the problem is even worse than has been described already. In the first in the first slide, we see something that's very interesting, and that is that after a long period going back to the late 60s of California being the largest state, the people, the organizations that project population in California and Texas currently now suggest that by about 2060, California will be the second largest state, not the first largest state. And you can see this chart that goes back to the beginning in 1850 and how California led for a long time. Now, the point is, though, things are really bad, really, really bad. You realize, and the popular press doesn't pick this up. There's been a lot more publicity in recent years about the domestic outmigration. That is, people who live in California who move elsewhere in the country. And since 2000, that number is 4 million. 4 million people moved out of California net, more than moved in. That's larger than the city of Los Angeles, which for 15 years, the Department of Finance has been saying is over 4 million, and every year or two they have to change the projection because it never quite gets above that. But I want to give you a bit on the circumstances. We've done this housing affordability report, the International Demographia International Housing Affordability Report. Now for 21 years, we'll be publishing the next version in the next year or two. But you can see what's going on here. And by the way, I want you to also be aware of the density of California's development. You'll get the impression that I am no friend of densification. In fact, California has the densest urban development in the country. Los Angeles urban area, which starts somewhere about Lake Forest and goes to Santa Clarita and goes out to Simi Valley and out to maybe Rialto or something like that. That is the densest urban area in the country, denser than New York by almost 20%. The difference, of course, is that Los Angeles does not have a Manhattan, but it has high-density suburbs like exist nowhere else in the United States, and it is the most dense, large urban area in the country. Now, moving on, let's see what's happened to housing affordability in California. This is, oh boy, I guess I don't need that. This is, oh, okay, good. I don't know what I'm doing here. Boy, that's all falling apart. Yeah, good.
I can keep it here.
Yeah, that'll do. Okay, in 1969, we use a price-to-income ratio in evaluating housing affordability. The price-to-income ratio is the median house price in a market like the Los Angeles metropolitan area, which includes Orange County, or the San Jose or the Sacramento, etc. The median multiple is the median household price divided by the median household income. It was under 3 in every major metropolitan area in the United States, except for New York and Honolulu, and those two, it was a little more than that in 1969. Now, among the large markets in California, the markets with more than 1 million, markets as small as, say, Fresno, it's about 8, and it gets up to 12 when you get to San Jose. Unbelievable. And so this is a real problem. And what has happened, and the one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, is the role of policies that try to discourage peripheral development. California planners and the California government at this point is adamantly opposed to allowing the market to develop housing on the core, on the edge of the urban area. And indeed, the market produced housing in this state until about 1980, with it sort of beginning to fall apart in the 70s, through the market. And what is needed is to begin to roll back the market distortions to allow the market to take care of it, because you can't afford the price that you cannot give median income households housing under the current situation, because it's just too expensive. Let me see here. In any event, what you see on this chart, the black line is the median multiple, or that price-to-income ratio I mentioned, rising from 3 in 1970 to up to as high as 10 in 1 year. The dotted red line is other major metropolitan areas in the United States that have a housing affordability, but you can see it's not as bad as California. And the green, is about the half of housing markets in the United States where it's not that good, but is still doing considerably better. Now, what's happened, though, since that time, or over the period? How did this happen? Well, it doesn't cost much more to build a house in San Francisco than it does in Dallas or Atlanta. It does cost a little bit different, but not that much. The big difference, however, is in the land. And when you go drawing lines around cities, as they've done in Houston, I'm not in Houston, in Tokyo and in other cities around the world and in the United States, including California, you end up forcing prices to go higher. And we know that, when OPEC decides they're going to limit how much oil they give us. And you see that issue just in California gasoline prices as well. So the basic point here is, in the good old days, 1969 in California, and today in half of the country, the cost of the land element when you buy a house was about 15%, and about 85% was the construction costs. Now, government data shows that in the San Francisco Bay Area, the cost of the land is about 70%, and in Southern California, 65%. That is a big deal, and that is the principal reason, in my view, that the problem is so bad. And by the way, California state government, despite having done what has been characterized as hundreds of bills, I'm not sure if that's quite true, the fact is none of them have addressed this problem, and that's going to be a problem, I think, in the long run. Now, the thing about it beyond that is that a lot of people would like you to believe that it's just demand, it's just everybody wants to live here, which is why, of course, 4 million people moved out. The basic point is, if you look at cost of living and the cost of goods and services, what we find using government data is 88% of the difference between normal cost of living in this country and California's and the cost of living in these markets that really seriously regulate peripheral demand or peripheral production. 88% has to do with housing. I know other things are higher in California. You can probably not get, in Chicago, you probably can't get the same goods out of the Jewel grocery stores as you do out of Rouse here, or you'll not do as well as California. But for anyone to suggest that anything other than housing is the driving force in what's gone wrong with California in moving you toward an environment of more poverty, because when you can't have the housing you need, you're talking about a situation of increasing poverty. The basic point is housing is the issue, and we need to deal with that and not pretend that things like, your gas prices are too much, but take a look at how much you spend on gas. It's not that much compared to what you spend on housing. Now, moving on, and this chart I have to apologize for because there's an error. I'll tell you right away. You see, what we've done here is attempt to compare the qualifying income for a loan on the median priced house in Orange County. Now, I apologize, this is a different number than we heard earlier. And that $316,000 number for last year was a mistake. I figured it out about 5 minutes before I got here. That number should be 389,000. Now, probably there are some among us here today that do not have sufficient income to buy the median priced house and loan and mortgage it in Orange County. And what I've compared that to is the U.S. median household income, which is $84,000 in 2024, $100,000 in the state, and $115,000 in Orange County. So this is really bad. And it's good that it's finally gotten some attention. I'm not optimistic at the moment, however, because a number of the revisions that have been done here and elsewhere in the country have failed to make much difference. Then we talk a little bit about densification. The urban planning community loves densification. And, the people don't actually, but that's another matter. If you look at what has happened in the last 4 years in terms of net domestic migration, 3.3 million people have moved, more people than moved out, and they moved out to places that are less dense, not to places that are more dense. There's this incredible belief in the urban planning community that as cities become bigger, they get denser. Not a chance. As cities that become bigger, they become less dense, not more dense. Now, you can see the suburban counties, like around the major cities, have done okay. They've gained 1 million domestic migrants. But what's amazing is the growth now is outside of the metropolitan areas. And by the way, the same thing is happening in Canada. And the same thing is happening in Canada because they have the strange, awful policies. So let's look then so that was that chart. I apologize for not getting that to you earlier. Now, to conclude, there are some solutions, but it's not difficult. It's not easy. You're looking at a situation that is going to take a long time to fix, but you must begin, if you're going to solve the problem, moving the housing market back into the market and away from subsidies. You will never subsidize this sufficient to make a big difference. In Texas, they have a program called the Municipal Utility Districts, and what happens there is developers come in, buy land, and they basically provide everything. They are not under city or county jurisdiction, except for the most basic things. And what they do is develop the infrastructure for the areas themselves. And eventually they may be annexed by a city, and that's okay. But this has allowed Texas to continue to build, not as fast as I'd like to see, but that's something that we've proposed needs to be done. Essentially what it would do would be to say, okay, to developers and home builders, we're going to go back to how it used to be when we had less restrictive regulation in this state. And we're going to do that in the places that are still more affordable. Not affordable, though. I mean, the San Joaquin Valley 10 years ago was affordable. The San Joaquin Valley, Fresno, Stanislaus County, etc. They are not affordable any longer, but they do have median multiples of 4 to 5 instead of 8 or 9 or more. Reminds me of a friend of mine, some of you may know, a guy by the name of Ray Haynes, who used to be a member of both the Senate and the Assembly, who was in the Republican leadership, and he always likes to say that we were okay with respect to housing affordability until the state forced us to start planning housing. Now that isn't a surprise, because the record in this world, quite frankly, of turning over important things to planners is questionable at the best. So that basically is all I have to say, except that there is something else that's as a result of the pandemic that represents an opportunity, and that is conversion of large buildings. And this is happening. I mean, you think about downtown LA. The company that I used to work for in Los Angeles, in downtown, Crocker Bank, built a building in 1968, 42 floors, about 600 feet, and they moved out of it. And nobody's there today. It's a Sixth and Hope. Okay, and there was a time when there were even reports, though I don't think they've come to fruition, that the owners of First Interstate Bank, I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but the big library tower building, there was some discussion about the possibility of converting some of that building to residential. There's another thing that is going on as well, even in some of the lower density suburban areas with the office parks. They have too much space. And so there are things you can do. And in fact, there have been a lot of complaints from people about how a lot of the newer buildings in New York and so on, and Los Angeles and San Francisco, you can't really develop them for apartments because nobody wants to live in the middle of them where there wouldn't be any windows. Well, apparently now, according to a Wall Street Journal article last week, there are a number of buildings in New York that are doing all sorts of things to increase window space and so on, and they're being successful. And so there is this, and we have not only the office buildings, but we also have shopping centers, all sorts of disused commercial properties. The number of shopping centers in this country that has failed is wild. And, you know, the shopping center that's there has already been built to have the traffic and so on. So it's not going to have the kind of opposition you got when you come in and you try to fit a couple of buildings between two houses that are sitting on a quarter-acre lot. A lot of neighborhoods don't like that. So anyway, thank you very much for being here. I consider it an honor to be in this program, and this is a real important project, and we need to get working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Wendell will be here on the panel, so when we do the Q&A, you can direct things at him, just not too much on the sharp side. Anyway, obviously a lot of this affects communities, and one of the things that started this discussion was the impact that this was having on specific communities. And of course, one that's felt this is the Jewish community. Jewish community was always assumed that, you know, your children would be able to buy a house somewhere nearby and you could see your grandchildren without getting on an airplane. And this is, I'm sure, happening to every one of the ethnic communities in this area. I know among the many Hispanics who are from LA, end up having their kids either moving to Texas or moving way out on the Inland Empire. So I want to start with Bruce. What do you, what has been the impact on your community and what you're seeing with the housing crisis?
Should I stand up there or just right here?
He'd be here. Just, yeah.
Okay, with my 5 minutes, yeah, stand up. With my 5 minutes, I'll go. It's okay. I'm good. I'm going to look at the community impact of the housing crisis as a microcosm of how it affects one aspect of one subpopulation for one community. I'm going to demonstrate that the cost of housing has substantially depressed synagogue membership in Los Angeles. And just for background, Los Angeles is the third largest Jewish community in the world, just edging out Tel Aviv. More than 2/3 of the Jews in LA County actually live in the city of LA. And using the most recent LA Jewish population study, I calculated that Jews make up something like 40% or more of the white population in the city of Los Angeles. So the white population declined, the Jewish population stayed steady. And it would have grown except for housing costs. If we have time, I can talk about that later. So what I'm going to do is to demonstrate the dramatic impact of housing costs on Jewish Los Angeles by comparing synagogue membership between two surveys of LA Jews, 1997 and 2021. So first of all, why synagogues? Synagogue is the American Jewish institution that touches the lives of the greatest number of American Jews. And I've done all kinds of research on this. This is when a Jew moves to a new community, usually the first place they contact is the synagogue, because everybody knows what synagogues are. They're in what we used to call the Yellow Pages. American Jews, unlike American Christians, formally belong to synagogues and pay annual membership dues. Only Mormons have a similar economic arrangement between their adherents and their religious institutions. So I'm going to look at just one subgroup of Los Angeles Jews, and that is in-married couples with children. So that means one Jew married to another Jew, including people who converted to Judaism, and they have at least one child in the household between 0 and 18, I guess 1 month and 18. I choose in-married couples with children because they have the highest rates of synagogue membership. So if anyone in a community is going to join a synagogue, it will be an in-married couple with children, because since the post-war suburbanization, that's really been the focus of synagogues, is serving families with children. In the 1997 study, 64% of in-married couples with children belong to a synagogue in Los Angeles. In 2021, that rate was cut almost in half. Today, only 36% of in-married couples with children belong to a synagogue. Okay, so how do we know this is the result of housing costs? Maybe synagogue membership declined because of secularization. The Pew Research Center, although it's finally leveled off for the last 20 years, has been showing the rise in the proportion of people who are religious nuns. So maybe that's all we're picking up. More Jews are secular. Synagogues are so, they're 20th century. We're moving on to new things. Well, fortunately, so how do we choose between these two explanations? Housing versus secularization. Well, fortunately, we have comparable data from a comparison community. Chicago is the next largest Jewish community in America after Los Angeles, and Chicago has conducted Jewish community surveys parallel to Los Angeles, meaning using the same methodology and pretty much around the same time. And in the case of the most recent studies, one in 2020 and one in 2021, it was actually the same people doing the research, the Center for Modern Jewish Studies at Brandeis University. So in Chicago in 2001, roughly 20 years ago, 69% of in-married couples with children belonged to a synagogue. Pretty similar to Los Angeles, where it was 64%. In the 2020 study, 60% of in-married couples with children had a synagogue membership. Again, the comparable drop in Los Angeles was from 64% to 36%. Chicago from 69% to 60%, and probably, given methodological differences and so forth, those are statistically pretty much the same. So what's the difference? I mean, the Chicago Jewish community looks a lot like the Los Angeles Jewish community. So what's the big difference between Chicago and Los Angeles? And I'll apologize, I just looked this up this is sort of the first thing that came up on the online search, although it's pretty consistent with your data. In 2024, the median home price in Cook County was $337,000. The median price in Los Angeles County was over $900,000. So it pretty much looks like housing costs, but we have further evidence for that. One of the questions in the study asked, during the past year, in what ways, if any, did your financial situation limit your participation in Jewish life? So going back to in-married couples with children, the primary market for synagogue membership, 29% of in-married couples with children said they did not enroll their children in Jewish education or camp or other activities because of financial costs. Now, it's not like those activities are exorbitantly expensive, at least they haven't gone up relative to whatever they cost 20 years ago. It's just that the families have much less expendable income. A quarter of them said that they required financial assistance to enroll children in Jewish education, camp, or other activities. So what does this mean practically for Los Angeles Jews? It means that Jewish children are not going to Hebrew school. It means that they're not going to Jewish camp. And there's a large body of research that shows that these experiences in the formative years have a huge impact later on in their adult lives as Jews. We experienced this firsthand in my own synagogue, which I'm on the board of directors. Over that same 20 years, our synagogue membership declined by 40%. We have the same rabbi, everyone likes him. If anything, services have gotten better. We ended up selling our separate religious school building to a developer who will be putting up, of course, luxury housing because we couldn't afford the upkeep of the building, and there just weren't enough kids to justify having almost an entire city block for a religious school. So I'm just going to conclude by saying in Los Angeles, we have literally mortgaged our Jewish future to housing costs.
Thanks, Bruce. And I assume that we probably would find if we did similar studies with church communities, we might find the same thing, or as people, again, their children cannot afford to live nearby, and there's enormous strain. One thing I always notice, I spend a lot of time in Texas, is there are lots of bad things about Texas, particularly they don't have days like this very often. But one thing that is true is I think there is a greater deal of pressure on young families when you have these high mortgage costs. So the question is, what do we do about it? And Wendell suggested one approach, but I'd like to ask Elizabeth Hansberg if she would just give us her take on that, and then we're hoping for a good discussion afterwards. So.
Can you repeat the question?
Well, I mean, how do we deal with this housing crisis? There are different approaches. Wendell talked about one. What would be your take?
So my overarching belief is that people should live where they want. that we should have a society and building patterns that allow people to live where they choose to live. I personally don't want to live in a low density place. I'm originally from Philadelphia. I've grown up in urban or inner urban suburbs. So for me, I like density. I like the things you get when you get density. So that's my personal choice. But I recognize that there are people who they want a 10,000 square foot lot or they want a 20,000 square foot lot for a price that is more in line with their income. And so the Inland Empire may be the best choice for them. I think what it really comes down to is the people who already live there, the people who already have their housing, the people who got in the 70s or 80s or 90s or even the very early 2000s do not want their communities to change. They are very resistant to any new people joining their community. There's a belief that zoning is a contract, and when you bought your house, nothing around you was allowed to change, and it has disenfranchised everybody under 40. If you live in California and you do not come from an immigrant family where your parents are immigrants and there's a high pattern of multi-generational households, white folks don't live that way. So, I mean, that's just how it is, right? I mean, I spoke in this room not even 2 weeks ago to the young professionals group of the CEO Leadership Council of Orange County, and every single one of those young people was either the child of an immigrant who lives here and still lives at home, or someone that was recruited by some of the major high-tech employers, Edwards Life Sciences, I think Pacific Insurance was one of them. There's a whole consortium of companies that have come together to try to hold on to their young people. And I really think the ones they're going to be able to hold on to are the ones who have families who are already homeowners for any duration of time. And the people who've come here from another place to start their career, if they are able to find housing within their budget in a place that they want to live, and I don't think we can say that the millennials are a monolith, that they all want to live in urban places and, you know, be serial or perpetual renters, right? I think that generation, like any generation, I think there's diversity in what people want. If they can find something in Orange County or nearby where they can afford to stay and build their own families here, I think they will. I think there are definitely people who are, you know, they're either from here or they move here and they think, wow, this is such a great place to live. I don't want to leave. But if we're going to have an Orange County that makes room for everybody, we have to allow more housing to be built. And we have tons of opportunity. We have so much underperforming commercial space, right? And if we can get Harry and Harriet, homeowner, away from the podium at the city council meeting and put forward the younger generations of people who want to live here, I think that change is possible. But when your elected officials are only hearing from Harry and Harriet homeowner, it makes it really hard for them to make the right decision for the future of their city. I think that's kind of where I land with it. So I guess my last point would be a call to action. If you are a young person in this audience, if you have young adult children and you don't want them to have to move to Texas, pay attention to your planning commission, pay attention to your city council, and when a development comes up for public comment, go. Tell the elected officials that you want to see new opportunities for development. It doesn't mean that your child is going to be the one that lives there. Maybe your child decides they do want to live in the Inland Empire or Kansas, I don't know. But to create that opportunity, it has to get personal. And we have to get to the microphone to give the elected officials who are not necessarily inclined in that direction, although we do have some cities that have that, some city councils that have that, give those elected officials a political cover to vote in the way that is going to create that opportunity for homeownership for the next generation. So, that's what I think.
I thought that was very useful. One interesting possible area where we could agree is that there should be more development of this redundant office and in some cases industrial and in many cases retail space. I think if you didn't go to people and say, we're going to put apartments next to your house, and you said, no, but we're going to put apartments someplace else, let's say, in the mall that you go to, I think there would be a higher degree of acceptance. And we have, and Marshall and I teach a class on artificial intelligence, and I can tell you the future of people building more office space is not there. I think we're going to see this consolidation. Now, the last speaker on this panel, because as many people think the real solution, if there's going to be one, it's going to be in the Inland Empire, is my friend Carla, who also worked with housing issues here in Orange County. So she's one of the rare people who sort of knows both places. So Carla?
Thank you. The biggest problem and challenge that I see is that the civic voice has been lost. We have no idea where to advocate. We have no idea how to address this issue. When I have worked with several, I would say more than hundreds of elected officials, they're not well educated. Many of them are first generation elected officials who are facing a problem that they have no idea how it got started. They're not sitting here with us, and we're not even having that conversation with them. So what I'm afraid of and what I have seen is moved from Mexico City, grew up in the most dense area you can imagine, not looking for density ever again.
No problem.
And that's why I think Elizabeth and I have been working in the field together for a long, long time, and we do believe in the ability to build communities at the local level that reflect the community that wants to be what it wants to be. But California is no longer giving us the opportunity to have civic engagement that really creates character in communities. Everything's starting to look like a cookie cutter. When you go to Mexico City, my hometown, it's looking very much like downtown Santa Ana. It's looking very much like Kingston's Toronto. And so what I'm seeing is working in Orange County, I started my career because I wanted to help people reach the American dream with the cornerstone of homeownership. I went to school for it, graduated, worked for an affordable housing nonprofit here, NeighborWorks Orange County, for about a decade. When I started working for NeighborWorks, it was a foreclosure crisis. We were helping hundreds, thousands of families to save their homes. It didn't get better though. And that's what I have seen, that NeighborWorks at this time, after, 10, 15 years, is no longer able to really create homeownership at big quantities. Like it's a celebration. When in the past, we used to have down payment assistance that used to work. We used to have programs that could unlock homeownership for families. Homeownership for Hispanics being one of the largest, if not going to be the largest population, is minimum in California. And that is setting up the country for a lot of people who are not participating in the American dream. And so what I'm fearful of is that we as citizens, specifically the 40 and below, we are losing the ability to dream, and that is not translating at the podium with the civic engagement. That's what I'm feeling. And that's what I can testify now that NeighborWorks, that here in Orange County, is now doing ADUs. Is it commendable? Absolutely, because we're trying to look for a solution. Is it going to get us out of the housing trouble? No.
You can't raise a family.
You cannot raise a family. And so many other things that we have come to realize that come with having strangers in your home and managing, properties. It's not just having someone there. A lot of churches that we've helped build on their own properties because they want to contribute to the solution are having really difficult time providing services that help the people that they wanted to help. And people are not talking to each other. There's no cohesiveness among us because, in my opinion, we have stopped dreaming. My other point I wanted to make very quick is we have the opportunity to start thinking of Southern California as a larger region. Being the residents of two counties that are very much dependent on each other. What I have seen is that there's an opportunity for developers and businesses to think of the Inland Empire as a place where they can open offices and they can kind of shift that paradigm of like the homes kind of follow the jobs. There's a lot of opportunity and a lot of, Wendell said we're in the 4 or 5 rather than 10. So there's still, for the young people here in Southern California who are looking for homeownership opportunities like I did. I bought my house in Eastvale in the Inland Empire about 9 years ago. I lived in Orange County, but had to make that very difficult decision. I was a single mom. I needed to invest my money, and just Orange County would not give me that opportunity. So I bought in the Inland Empire, and I discovered a beautiful new world that is not very well articulated, but is where a lot of opportunity is still happening. So I think that it's not just, like we mentioned before, this is so complex that there are other levers that we can move that can make a change in how we see housing and how we develop housing. And then lastly is solutions are not, in my opinion, going to come from a national person that's gonna get up and say, oh, you know what, how's Elizabeth doing today in Santa Ana, California? There's nobody in Sacramento getting up and asking themselves, how's Carla doing in the Inland Empire? And what I have seen is that the relationship between Sacramento, those that make policy, and the locals is extremely important. The investments that are not going to the Inland Empire are because they don't know the people in the Inland Empire. And when you get to have close relationships with Sacramento and they understand your potential, they understand your opportunity, that's where I think we can start thinking of the region as an actual region rather than 2 or 3 or 4 different counties divided when we all are sharing the same issue. So I guess my call to action is to pay attention to the inland. That's where we're seeing the growth, where we're seeing the affordability, and where there's a big future for the 40 and under.
That was good. All right, so we have about 10 minutes for questions, so you can ask the question to the whole panel or to an individual. Anybody? We have another microphone. Yeah, so. And you look like you're under 40.
I am. Yes, thank you. This question is for Wendell. You were talking a little bit about how there's a lot of buildings that are being underutilized throughout California, but there's also a lot of peripheral development that's not been used. Would you say that those two issues are creating a reduce in our productive output? And if those issues were fixed, we would see more productive output in the economy regarding our real estate, and if that would help boost the economy that way? And would you say that fixing the issue of underutilizing our current infrastructure, do you think that would reduce our need for more peripheral development?
Well, I don't think that there's any way to reduce the need for peripheral development. It has to do with how markets work. And denying how markets work is what got this state in trouble. I don't know, and so therefore you've got to get that price down. When you go and draw lines around a city, and that's been done, in Santa Clara County, Alameda County, elsewhere, when you do that, you basically have a situation where the prices go up like this at the peripheral restriction, the urban growth boundary in the Bay Area. However, with respect to the underutilization of the shopping centers and commercial facilities and all that kind of thing, I think the market is there and we need to do things to try to encourage it. But I don't know how much there is out there, but there's certainly enough to cause to have some difference. And it would also, I would think, reduce the overall prices of land if it's a big enough issue.
Anyone want to add to this? Or? Okay. We have another question.
If somebody's gotta have a question.
I do.
Okay,
I have no idea who to direct this to, but I think it was yesterday or this week, I just heard the report about West LA wanting to build a homeless, I'm not sure exactly what they're doing by the VA center. And they're stirring up a lot of controversy because they want to put the encampments off the streets in that housing. Of course, the homeowners who have bought the billion-dollar homes in the Wilshire corridor aren't wild about this. This seems to be a new kernel in the exact part of the solution. So here we have property, we have willingness, we have a need, and we have an obstacle. And knowing how California works, I don't think it's gonna look good for the homeless population to be able to move into there, nor do I personally believe that's the right solution either for the communities. How do we cover that impasse?
Elizabeth, have you dealt with this issue?
So this may be an unpopular opinion for anyone who is a homeowner. I'm a homeowner, but I don't really care that some folks are nodding. I don't really care that they don't want veterans living near them on VA property that was always intended to serve the veteran community. We're not buying one person's house, tearing it down, and building the homeless housing there. We're using the veteran of Veteran Administration. We're using their land to serve that population. If you are in Orange County and you are interested in being on the yes side of this, peopleforhousing.org is my website. You were speaking to the fact that, you think there's a market for the turnover. There are 4 hearings that I'm going to, 2 last week, 1 this week, and 1 the next week. 3 of the 4 of them are tearing down old office that is 40% or more vacant and building townhomes. The 3-story townhome with tuck-under parking is the first-time home buyer product for Orange County. If you're interested in this, if you're interested in being an advocate, subscribe to my list. I will send you an email when there's a project in your community that you can advocate for, because Harry and Harriet aren't going anywhere.
I've seen some interesting results when there is an actual conversation between the people who want to be there and the people who already live there. One example is in downtown Riverside. If I get a chance, I want to highlight some of these really great things that are happening in the Empire, where there was a home that's available to individuals who have AIDS, who are past substance abusers, and they're getting back on track. And it was built inside of a neighborhood that everybody thought it was going to get shut down. And what the executive director of that organization did was he knocked on every single door of that community and started bringing the homeowners into the planning of what that was going to look like in their neighborhood, making them feel part of that solution as well. And there was compromise. There was some, how many people you're going to have here, what type of security we're going to have. And the campus today looks beautiful. Is it working perfectly? Absolutely not, but it is working. And it got built because there was nobody at the podium that was saying no. What they were saying is, let's fix the things that don't work. But it exists today. So I would say that maybe Harry and what was that?
Harry and Harriet.
Harry and Harriet. It's more about a civic conversation rather than us versus them. Because once you start talking to them about their children, I'm sorry about that last man, but most of us want to grow up with our grandchildren, get to see them, be part of their lives. But the civic conversation is getting very difficult between generations, and that is detrimental to building together. So I would say that we need to expand the civic discourse to involve the people that are going to end up with these projects, because the one thing I have noticed is that they don't find out until it's getting done. And having that surprise for many homeowners it goes against what they want. So if you engage them at an earlier time, maybe not every time, you might have a better outcome in the future.
So I'll just add that all that outreach costs money. One of the developers here in Orange County that has given to my work spends $30,000 a month on retainers for outreach. $30,000 a month on retainers for outreach consultants to do exactly what Carla's saying. Go out to the community, meet with the homeowner, right? We can do it, it's really expensive. And the cost of that gets rolled into the housing cost. And if that development doesn't go forward because Harry and Harriet are successful in derailing it, that cost gets rolled into the cost of the next successful project. And those are the homeowners that are gonna pay for that. So I don't disagree. I think conversation is really important. It's so expensive, I don't think we can make that, a regular practice. But perhaps, the political capital in the Buffy and Bucky neighborhood will be enough that they should spend the $30,000 a month times, 24 months that it takes to do this entitlement process. It may be worth it. Are they gonna be doing that in the low-income neighborhoods of Santa Ana? I don't think so.
Well, obviously, there's a lot to think about, and what I
like towards the end is we're starting to say, what are the solutions? I mean, we know for sure that the same old stuff is not gonna work over time. You have one question and
One last question before you transition your panel. Thank you for being here today. I have a question for the researcher from Riverside, Carla. Can you describe some of the trends that you're seeing? You talked about there's a lot of opportunity in coming to Riverside County. What does that mean for Orange County in terms of the housing, the displacement that's occurring? What are some of the trends that you're seeing among a couple of demographic groups, if you will?
Hispanics are in the Inland Empire are really becoming a force of housing need. Many of them coming from LA. There's a lot of push. Riverside County is the fastest growing county in California at this time. There's about 30,000 people coming every year, which is a small city being added. So lots of pressure to build homes. What I have seen in trends is there is a lot more camaraderie among us in need. In the Inland Empire, I have seen innovation in, for example, affordable houses in the desert area. They're getting together and they're showcasing where development has happened, where it's pipelined, and where it's needed. And you can see it as a collaborative of people talking to each other through data and showcasing that. Specifically, a lot of that work is many of us are part of these two counties, and what we're seeing is that there is more understanding of the Orange County community, business community now, that are seeing that there's a lot of potential of keeping families in place using technologies like remote work. And so remote work is in many ways the future for a lot of Inland Empire, Orange County families that we all live now. A lot of grandparents that live in the desert area, a lot of children that are now coming into the area. And so we're starting to see family reunions back in Inland Empire. That's the trend that I'm seeing. And it is looking for affordability. And it is because, the fight that Elizabeth fights here in Orange County produces, thousands of dollar homes, not hundreds of thousands, and
Right.
millions that we
Oh,
need.
fair enough.
So the real growth is happening, and the real possibility is in the Inland Empire. Technology can really help us shift the paradigm of how we are making our families commute to this area. And just a quick, I had to do that commute for a year between Orange County and Inland Empire when I had to buy my home. I was miserable. There were times where I would wake up and I did not want to wake up to go to work because it was just an endless cycle of getting up, getting ready, going to an office, coming back in, and I didn't see my daughter. I did not participate in my local community, and I felt very disconnected from my family. So if we can create jobs in the Inland Empire, in communities in the Inland Empire, Southern California would really benefit from that.
Right, well, anyway, let's thank the panel. I think they've been terrific. And now I'm gonna hand it over to Mr. Toplansky and let him take over.
Thank you, Joel. And again, thank you everybody for being here. I love the conversation so far. It's just great to hear how the demand side of all of this is shaping up. What are the forces, what are the cultural and social implications of having such an out of whack affordability problem. But there's two sides to every story. And as much as we talk about the social impact, the cultural impact, the demand side of this, somebody has to actually make it happen. And that's the folks on this side of the room. Everybody here on this side are seasoned developers who have done commercial or residential projects and face a lot of problems in trying to meet the demand that you're talking about and navigate the very tortuous road to being able to get to build anything, whether it's affordable housing or not. And I'd love them to kind of share their stories about what they're up against and how they see the potential for solving the problem. We start with Joel Farkas.
Thank you. Name is Joel Farkas. I develop in most of the western United States, California, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, other places, Idaho. Quick question to the issues we face, we are the most despised industry, other than oil and gas, in the world. These are all wonderful comments. Everyone here cares that people have a high quality, affordable home to live in. The problems we face, it's one of the damnedest things I've ever seen. I've never seen an issue that people from the very far left to the very far right and everywhere in between, who agree on almost nothing, they agree on one thing: they don't like what we do. Now, what is it we do? We want to provide. Actually, I'm gonna take that back. We're not providing anything. We are responding to a need and a demand that, I'm not going to use the word average people, because this is the vast majority of people in the world, have always wanted. And this conversation we're having today is not abnormal. This is actually a normal conversation for about 4,000 years. The notion that an individual would have the right to own property is the rarest thing that you can imagine. We're familiar with the Declaration of Independence in 1776. There was a book written by Adam Smith called An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, coincidentally written in 1776. And I'll summarize it for you. It's very long. I actually read the book. It's 2 big volumes. I recommend you don't. It takes a lot of time. But I'll summarize it for you. He said something to the effect of labor creates wealth, and suppressing labor preserves wealth. Now, that doesn't mean what you might think it means. He had a solution. His solution was something called capitalism, which was allow labor to have transactions amongst themselves, not have mercantilism, not have monarchies, not have tyrannies, not have dictators, not have policy makers, not have central government, not have communism, or so call it whatever you want. He basically said, it's a seminal book on the greatest way for a nation and community to create wealth, is to have individuals have the ability, the authority to transact amongst themselves, and that in and of itself would create the greatest, wealthiest, happiest, most prosperous nation in the world. And for a while it did. It was called the United States of America. And we've ruined it. I'm going to take the personal blame. I've been in this business 42 years. When I began, the median age of a homeowner was 31 years old. Today it's 57 years old. The median age today of a first-time home buyer is 41 years old. That's the most disgusting, pathetic thing I've ever heard. And there's enough blame to go around, and I'll start with taking it myself, because I've actually been in this business that long. What is the solution? It is quite simple. Homeownership. I don't know how many people actually spend much time listening to an elected official run on, I want to increase homeownership in this country. I've actually heard over the last 25 years, many people running for local, state, federal office saying, I want homeownership to decline. I want some other committee to determine who's going to live where, why they're going to live there. I've been to more than 2,000 homeowners association meetings, city council meetings, county commissioner meetings. And I've never been to one where I heard someone say, I want someone who makes less than me, whose house costs less than mine, living next to me. Never heard it. Not once at 2,000 meetings. Now that doesn't make all these people bad people. What it means is the advocacy of kind of fanciful term called affordable housing. It's almost a euphemism now. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. What really means something is I raised 5 children. Almost all of them and their friends have left Southern California. None of them can afford, their father actually made a pretty good living, but they can't afford to live here. They went somewhere else. And you know what? It's getting worse. And it will not get solved until everyone in the community says homeownership is a priority. The Constitution and the amendments to the Constitution, in at least 5 different amendments, refer to private property rights. I don't know the last time I heard an election where someone says, I want to support private property rights. Now, it's a bastardized term, because when you say, I want the right to use my property, that becomes saying, I don't want someone else to be there. No, what we're saying is we want more people. We want homeownership rates to increase. That doesn't mean we want to eliminate apartments. That doesn't mean we want to eliminate affordable housing. It means we want homeownership rates to increase. And I could spend about 4 weeks on this subject, so I'm going to keep it short. Anyone who would like to talk about it in more detail, I'd be happy to. But I will say, I believe me, my colleagues, and other people in this business know how to solve this problem, because we are solving it today. And the reason no one in this room has heard of it is because, as I started with, most of the people that have the microphone, that have the $30,000 a month to hire advocates, that have the reporters who will report on what they want to report on, the public officials who like to run on this issue every 2 years rather than solve it, most of them don't care about the solution. It's called what a city manager 25 years ago told me, that I've never forgotten, when I came in talking about almost everything that we're talking about right now. Is trying to convince him that this new project I wanted to develop was going to help bring in young first-time home buyers. They can live near their grandparents, they can live near their parents. He said to me, I'll leave his name out, he's retired, I don't need to insult him. I did in person, but I'm not going to do it today. He said, Joel, you've told me what it is your business is. Now let me tell you about the business of city government. We're run on sales tax revenue. And every single thing you just said costs us money, and we have no interest in it. That was 25 years ago. And again, this is so normal. This started in 1776 when Adam Smith said, give the vast majority of people the opportunity for private property to transact amongst themselves, and you will create the best opportunity for a wealthy nation. This is the norm. And we have an opportunity though to solve it. And the people at this table here actually are solving it. But we're not doing it for the credit. But I guess I'll tell you one reason why I keep doing it. I don't have any hair left to pull out. But one reason I keep doing it is it's only about 25% of the people in this country that can afford to buy a home. My market's 75% of the country. So it's a pretty good market.
Thank you. So, from your perspective, one of the major tenets of your solution is get the government the hell out of this and let the market and individuals solve this problem on their own.
Well, when it's said that way, yes, but when it's said that way, that means let's just have anarchy. But that's not what...
No, you're not proposing anarchy. You're proposing minimizing the intrusion of government.
What I am going to, I'll just be as blunt as I can. Government can't stand up and say we're going to get rid of private property rights. I'll tell you, the same city where that city manager gave me that lecture, the utility director said to me, You know, Joel, it's hard for me to get any new water and sewer capacity approved, but I can darn well kill any deal that we have.
Well, thank you for that. Eric, it's over to you. You have been developing in West LA on a very large scale for quite a while. What are you experiencing? What do you think the solution is all about here?
Thank you, Eric Kazin. Yeah, so we've been developing a little bit all over, but like you said, government policy, city officials are a huge problem. But for us, a major problem has been construction costs at the core. It's been brutal. The last 25 years, it seems like it's at least doubled, if not tripled. It is significantly more expensive to develop in California than in Texas or somewhere else. And so we really had to go to our roots. And so we went to our suppliers. Other than concrete and type 5 wood, everything else does come from China. So we went back to China and we started beating that up as much as we can. And really our final solution is modular. Traditional building is just too expensive. Modular is quick, rapid implementation, so we're not stuck around for a year and a half to 2.5 years. Financing costs, the environment, human error. Also labor shortages. You know, he was talking about 4 million people have left. Of those 4 million people are skilled labor, contractors, great builders, moving to other places like Texas where they see a better opportunity, cheaper land. And so for us, the only thing we really could fix is our vertical construction costs. And so we have purchased a factory that's already done about 200,000 units as far as the tiny homes. And so we've upgraded everything, and we have 2 versions. An affordable version, which we're producing at about $75 per square foot, our vertical construction. And our higher end market rate, which is at about $100 per square foot. The difference there is higher ceilings, so more steel, and larger windows.
Just to give everybody a little touchstone on this, because it's just fabulous that you're applying modern manufacturing techniques to such an archaic industry. What would the normal construction costs stick built?
So a normal stick build contractor, let's say he's just doing ADUs, he's at about $160 per foot, his vertical, $30 for his soft costs and horizontal, but that's just a small ADU, and leaving out his profit margin because he's going to be building there for a little while, so he's got to make something. So that takes him at about $250 to $300 is what people are looking at to build. You want a bit higher end, you jump into $350 a foot. We start doing mid-rise, high-rise. Those numbers start escalating rapidly due to foundation increase. So concrete has skyrocketed, and so for your foundations, when you go higher, they got to be deeper. Everybody's pretty much on the same page in site work and horizontal costs. There has been some innovation in concrete pouring, but not enough. Also, you know, you'll be stuck out there building for a long time, you know, 1.5 years, 2.5 years, and you're paying a financing charge. This is money you're just spending until you can get to rent stabilization or to even sell your units. So we need something that can be, you know, assembled in a day.
Well, this is fantastic to hear about, right? The idea that we're able to apply modern techniques for manufacturing things to achieve what sounds to me like a 1/3 cost of construction. That's terrific. I would think, Mott, from where you're coming from, you have a kind of a unique aspect. You are both vice chair of the Small Business Development Committee in the city of Los Angeles and a commercial developer for commercial projects. How do you see all of this, and what is that interaction between the government either supporting, opposing, or maybe even just being hands off entirely, and your efforts?
Yeah, thank you, Marshall. And I should say that probably the most relevant aspect of my CV is that I'm also chairman of the board of the Council of Infill Builders, which is the statewide association in California of people doing stuff like we'd be big consumers of this. And I just excuse me while I ask Art a question. Is that $100 installed on site?
Vertical construction, yeah, installed, that's with the appliances, everything.
Wow.
Kitchen
Ladies
appliances.
and gentlemen, there was a joke that I heard a long time ago, which is that, by the way, for those of you who don't know, modular is factory-built housing, where it's substantially created in the factory and then trucked out and assembled like, IKEA furniture in a matter of days. And there's a joke that modular is the future of construction, and always will be. Because nobody for 100 years had figured out a way to make it economic, so it sounds like this is very impressive.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're just not able to do it in the US. We don't have the know-how. All the machines that build the factories come from other countries.
Yeah.
So everything it's overseas. We have been surpassed in construction and building in the US by multiple countries.
Well, at least we don't have tariffs keeping that sort of technology out of the US, so that's...
Which is brutal for a lot of new people trying to come in. The tariffs will break you, but for us, still at the end of the day, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. And truthfully, tariffs might go down.
True. So it's very cool, and I appreciate the question. I mean, to put a slightly different spin on this, when I think about what the challenge is for builders out there, I mean, one of the issues is absolutely construction. The cost of construction is crazy, and part of the reason it's so high is because of creeping regulations that when you look at what fire code says, with what structural code says, with what plumbing code says, and zoning code, and you layer them, and the number of actual buildings that can be built to satisfy all of those codes simultaneously is a number that's been dropping rapidly over the years. And this is one of the reasons why our communities increasingly look homogeneous, why you can go to Texas and see basically the same product you see in California. It's because the intersection of all those codes has a tighter and tighter solution set. It's also one of the things that makes converting office buildings to housing and other forms of adaptive reuse difficult, is that our codes have gotten much more specific and much stricter without any countervailing forces, and the real world solutions have gotten fewer and fewer and fewer. And so, because that is really a fundamental problem, it's ironic that a lot of our advocacy at the state and at local levels to date has focused on what we call entitlements. And entitlements, for those who are not familiar with this, that's planning approval for what it is you're doing. It could be a zoning approval, it could be a subdivision map, it could be a variety of things. And if you're a developer and you're lucky enough to have land that is entitled, that doesn't mean anything except when you show up at the city to get a building permit, you go straight to the counter where they give you the building permit. If you don't have entitlements and you show up and you ask for a building permit, they say, well, first go get zoning approval. And so because so much state action and local action is focused on making it easier to get entitlements or providing pre-negotiated solutions for some of the conflicts that arise when people ask for entitlements. Like, for example, density bonus law, where if you build a certain percentage of affordable housing, you can build extra market rate housing, things like that. Those are all fine, but they don't make it easier to build. They don't lower the cost of construction. They don't create demand where there isn't demand. And it's, I think we've over-indexed, as they say, on permission to ask for permission rather than making building work better itself. Now, why is this and what's at stake here? If I had 30 years to solve the problem, which who knows how much time we have or don't have, if I had 30 years to work on this, the number one thing that I would work on, and it's interesting that this has come up several times on the panel already, is public finance. And I would argue that if you compare the way we build infrastructure in, frankly, all of America and most of the English-speaking world today versus how we did it 100 years ago, the biggest difference that I see is that the primary enterprise of government over the past 100 years has been to outsource infrastructure development to the private sector. The thing that, and it's funny, I was talking with Michael Stockstill about wherever you are, there you are, about the Irvine plan, and how one might compare this to the Great Chicago Plan. And one of the things that strikes me about the Chicago Plan from 1911 was that it was a plan for how it was a plan drafted by the business community of Chicago, actually, not by the city of Chicago, and it was handed to the city of Chicago, and it said, "City of Chicago, we're the shareholders basically of this great enterprise. You should figure out how to invest in specific improvements on Michigan Avenue and specific improvements to the lake and specific transit improvements." It was literally a capital plan for the public resources of Chicago, and it came with a financing plan, a plan for legislation that would have to happen to make it all possible, and it was about public infrastructure financed by the public and that would serve the collective private interests of the city. And that is the opposite of how we do planning today. Today, the city says, private sector, here's what you should do, and it's usually wrong. And this is why, as developers, a big part of our business is saying, I want permission to do something that's not in the plan, which is why we're such a maligned profession, because every time we show up at the city, we're asking to break the rules, basically. That's our business. And that's messed up. We should be in the business of building the best places that people want to live in for the best prices, as efficiently as possible, with the best financing. That's a typical business. That's what we should do. And the reason we can't is because cities have lost the ability to build their own infrastructure, I would argue.
Howard Roark review.
Yeah, you could say that. Yes, you could say that.
This is a very core libertarian thought, as well as something that's been written about extensively by Ayn Rand and the Fountainhead. But you're right, it's just about entrepreneurial vigor. The idea of creating an idea and being able to move forward with it without undue impediment from the city. And what's great about that 1911 Chicago plan is exactly what you pointed out, which is that somebody had to step up and say, we take responsibility for coming up with the big picture of what it is that we think would be in the best interest of the community. The community bought into it, and then the governmental authorities responded to that. We don't seem to have that anymore.
We don't. And may I clarify respectfully? I'd say what's not very Howard Roark of me is I actually see a very strong role for the government, which you just articulated beautifully, which is to be the public infrastructure provider and to provide financing for this. And also, very importantly, to Joel's point earlier about what the free market needs to do, the government's job is to allow the good guys to win in a free market competition. If there's not sufficient regulation, quite often it becomes a cesspool. And so we need to play with good refs on the field. Otherwise, the bad guys are going to win. And so for good guys like us to actually compete, we need the government to provide that market. So those are the two differences between you and Howard.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Great insights. Roger, you have been at this for quite a while. I would bet even longer than Joel has been at it in terms of developing homes for people. Most recently, you have been focusing on the question of how do you get Harry and Harriet, or Marshall and Harriet, as the case might be, to think about moving into out of the home that they grew up in by providing product for them. How do you see all of this developing? What's different today than it was when you first started out in 1973 doing this?
Thank you very much. 1976, actually. A lot of good comments, and I do want to wish everybody a happy holiday. That is that time of year. But I do want to try to bring some good news to this, because I'm not necessarily hearing any good news. I'm hearing a lot of problems, a lot of complaints, and so forth. But first of all, my first home that I built at 18 years old was a kit home. It was a kit. You actually bought the product as a kit, and then you would hire a framer, and you'd hire a plumber, and you would hire a roofer, and they would build what was a one-bedroom house on a lot that was 25 by 100, and the cost was $39.95. Now, I was very compelled to build and very compelled to own, and that's true today as well. I love building, and I love having people buy our homes. And across the last 40 years, our company has specialized for first-time buyers. And you can say, well, that's for the affordable buyers. It's for first-time buyers. And that has been across most of Southern California, including San Diego, down in East Lake, and we were in 1988, we were the first builder in Rancho Santa Margarita. We built on the lake there. That was a 5,000 acre community. We built in East Lake a 7,000 acre community in San Diego. We were the first builder there, but again, focused on first time. And the builders that we dealt with were those that were very well known here in Orange County. Bill Lyon, Jim Peters, the Baldwins, all privates. Okay, we had one group called Kaufman and Broad, and that was a public home builder, now called KB. Because of the change in the dynamics and the change in the availability of land, we do what Steve commented about is we do a lot of research as to where can we find property that we can build that can be affordable for the first-time buyer. Now let's define first-time buyer in the Inland Empire. And by the way, I really enjoyed Elizabeth and Carla's information about the Inland Empire. That's where we build. I'd love to build in Orange. I grew up in Orange. I'd love to build more in Orange County. We must build in the Inland Empire because, again, the first-time buyer, the target price of our product is between $550,000 and $625,000. We don't pay over 10% for the land. I heard something earlier today about the land being 70% of the cost of the house. We pay 7% to 10%. My direct costs, okay, are $89 a foot. Wow. $89 a foot. How do you do it? You thoroughly understand your cost, your engineering. What is the additional cost for a 9-foot plate? That's what I do for a living because I can deliver my house for people in the first-time market. Now, that's not all we do. In the Inland Empire, we're building $1 million houses and selling very well, but we don't build a lot of them. Everything is based on knowledge of the product, okay, and knowing the components. And, by the way, I was told this by someone years ago, Roger, if you pay faster, they'll build faster. That's a simple concept. We pay very fast. But the only way we can deliver the product is to be able to buy the land right and entitle it, which we completely do ourselves. We don't buy entitled land. It's a wholesale approach, different, time consuming, and we deliver somewhere between 100 and 150 houses a year. Now, I'm very happy with that. And that's a very good delivery for us. And we continue to do that. And we have a very deep pipeline. However, it is expanding. Okay, when it's expanding from Riverside to Moreno Valley to San Jacinto to Beaumont and probably go into Coachella. And then you're going to go to the high desert. The reason you would go there is only because the jobs. You have to have the jobs. We talked about one word, jobs. If somebody has to commute for an hour, it's going to be very difficult for them to buy your house. Now, let's talk about what I think is coming. I think we're going to have lower interest rates. What do I think? I think we're going to be 5.5 by next June. We're under 6 now. FHA is 5.5. Nobody talks about it much. We're 5.5, and I think we're going lower. Okay, the cost of gasoline is going lower. Wood cost is dropping. We're buying wood now less. 2 years ago it was higher. Now it's less. Same with steel. All this is going to help us and help the consumer because we're going to pass that price on. We have 98% applicant approvals for the loans. Okay. Now, what are some of the things that I think can be done? One is I think there should be a first-time tax credit for first-time home buyers. It's been talked about. We have a White House that's going to compel this. He's not only going to sell watches, he's going to sell tax credits, okay, for the first time buyer. And I seriously, that's going to get done, in my opinion. I think deregulation is going to occur. I think that's going to be a big part of his mission. There's no doubt in mind that T-bills are going to come down. They're going to come down and be at 3%. That's going to take my cost of building, my cost of borrowing, from basically prime plus 1 to probably 7 plus 1 plus, now it'll be 5 plus 1. I mean, all this savings is going to allow me to continue to build affordable for the first time market in general. And that's what we do. And I think there's a continuum here. Now, if you don't buy the land right, if you don't get the entitlement right, and what do I mean by the entitlement right? We're building 20 units to the acre, 3-story, infill locations on abandoned Albertson site. Market's gone. And it's 85 units, and they're going to start at 519, 539, 569. Think about that number, that price. Do you know the average new home price in the Inland Empire is $725? $725. And by the way, it's not going up, it's going down. Public builders are not buying land right now, it's on hold. If they don't buy land, what happens to the land price? It goes down. It's a supply and demand business. So I'm very encouraged in the next few years, even though the geography will be expanded, and in my opinion, there will be job creation in the Coachella Valley and in the high desert. Now, I'm talking about job creation. AI, big plants will come in and employees will employ those people living in the high desert and the low desert. So I'm very optimistic about Southern California, Inland Empire. Not that there aren't other locations. I've built Montana and so forth, and it cost me twice as much to build Montana. But I had one inspection, one single inspection in Montana. Wow. We have 17 here locally. So I'm not, I'm an optimist, okay? But it's taken a lot of years to get this figured out. And I have a very, very strong team that's very good at what they do. And I would be happy to pass that on to any person that is interested in learning more about this business. And I really appreciate your comments about the Inland Empire, because that really is where home builders like myself, particularly private, can build. That's a very good market for us. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. That's really terrific for everybody here. And by the way, I think what we're, am I on here? No, I guess I'm not. What I'm particularly delighted about, thinking about the four of you, the industry is very dynamic.
Yeah.
You guys are really able to adapt to the changes that you're seeing, and you're very creative in the kinds of ways that you're going at it. So I'm kind of optimistic myself about the industry rising to the occasion, and hopefully with as little government interference as possible. But that's just my interest. I want to hear from you guys. What questions do you have for our panelists? In the back over there.
Hi everyone. So I'm not expert in real estate field, and I really enjoy everyone's sharing. I learned a lot today. Thank you so much. First of all, I have a question more for this side. It's asking, would you have any proposed plan for the next maybe 10 to 20 years about government policies in regards to property taxes? Because I really back the middle guy there. His comment that he believes government should be the supporter, should be the one that bring up more finances and infrastructure thing. So I think, what would you think about property taxes and how it could help lift our burden? And I also have a second question is, I really like your idea saying, any plan or project to support local businesses, because a lot of the business go to a lot of families, they cannot afford, let's say, childcare services or any paid services because they need to pay higher mortgage payments. So what would you think of that? Actually, in terms of LA County, because I didn't really visit Inland Empire a lot, but in LA County around my neighborhood, I do see more and more vacancy, like in malls and also in Sorry, I have to type out my questions. There's more and more empty units and at plazas and malls. Let's say in Rolling Heights, the Panhills Mall is completely empty, but the mall is still very new and all. So that one is a commercial building, and I am really, really surprised. Like, just talking about the cost to demolish building, the cost to build new buildings and stuff. Yeah, thank you.
So once upon a time, there was a man named Howard Jarvis. And part of the reason that cities are not in a position to build the infrastructure that Mott called for is because of Prop 13. There's also a lot of truth in the fact that if people were actually taxed on their homes at the value of the present day, there's a lot of people that couldn't afford their homes. So it's a double-edged sword, right? If we raise taxes to enable cities to have the money to build the infrastructure that Mott is calling for, that will support the private development and the transactions between private actors. That means that a lot of the people that are already here, myself included, I couldn't buy my house today. There's no way. So there's a trade-off there. Just this last election cycle, well, not this one, but the last major one, there was a change in how property taxes are levied on inherited homes. If you're not using it as your primary residence, right? So say your parent dies, you inherit the home. If you don't make that home your primary residence, you lose the ability to enjoy that low tax rate. But one of the things that we got when we got Prop 13 was the ability to pass down a home from grandparent to grandchild and still hold on to that that low tax rate. And if you look around Orange County, this is my hypothesis, a lot of these empty strip malls, right, that could be redeveloped, there is absolutely zero economic pressure on that landowner to turn it over. It doesn't need to generate income because the taxes on it are like $900 a year. So if we could, there was a measure 2 election cycles ago to split the roll. That's what that means, split the roll. So tax commercial property different than we tax residential property. I think that's a great idea. I think splitting the roll is a really great idea so that we are pressuring commercial properties to actually have to generate revenue, right? To make them useful. Because as it is now, there's a huge, it's acres and acres of asphalt from a strip mall that burned down in my town. And there's a reciprocal drive easement over these 2 neighboring properties. And the legend is that these 2 property owners hate each other. And so no one is willing to give up the easement over the other guy's parcel. And so it just sits there. It sits there and it rots, right? It would be a great place for 3-story townhomes with tuck under parking. Mr. Hobbs, I would like to invite you to my city. But as it is right now, it's just asphalt acres, right? And, so.
Is that here in South County?
No, this is in Fullerton. Corner, it's on Raymond Avenue between Commonwealth and Placentia, in between the Polly's Pies and the Walgreens.
And I agree with almost everything Elizabeth says. I think we need to figure out how to deal with the property tax problem. LA City just made it far worse by passing something known as Measure ULA, which is a transfer tax of up to 5.5% for high value transactions, which means that now there's even less incentive for people to sell their properties. And actually there was a study led by UC Irvine on the impact of that to future property tax revenues. And they found that for every $1 that they charge in transfer tax, they're losing at least $1 in future property tax revenues. So it is a real thing. The split roll, I'm lucky enough to own industrial property in Los Angeles and in Chicago, which doesn't have any caps on property tax. And Chicago has a city council system with, I think, 35 aldermen, nearly all of whom have a side business in doing property tax appeals. And I'm actually not exaggerating. Several of them with an FBI record as well. And it's not simple because everybody wants to charge all the rent they can. Everybody wants to do what they can. And then if you've got an arbitrarily high property tax, which is what happens in a place like Chicago, they decide they want to fund the teacher pensions as they double your property taxes. and then it's a huge fight. It's not a magic bullet. So there have to be nuanced answers that give the cities power to generate revenues and pay for infrastructure. I'm not sure if the split roll per se is the answer. Might be something like that. I don't know.
More questions?
Thank you. Great presentation. What do you think about building ADUs? Do you think this can be a good solution to the problem we have now about the affordability? And especially in Inland Empire, if you own a house, will it be a good idea also to, if you have the sufficient room, of course, backyard or whatever else, build also an ADU? Thank you.
Absolutely. It fits a need. Let's say you have college kids coming home. You can put this in an ADU, it's cheaper rent. Also, at the end of the day, it adds to your net worth. Also, if we need more supply, with the rules by Newsom, you can put an ADU anywhere. Everyone has this right, even multifamily. The problem is with multifamily for parking, but for homeowners, ADUs is great. You kind of get to bypass the city, it's expedited, you don't deal with a ton of nonsense. There still is impact fees, which are brutal once you get over 500 square feet. But if you want to put an aging family there, your kids' family that can move into the main house, we see a lot of that. A rental income, if you're good in a good area that can charge decent rents, it helps you pay off your mortgage. So I do think ADUs are quite beneficial, but they are not the final solution.
Let me address that and also a couple of the other items that were brought up regarding infrastructure and fees and property taxes. In our developments, we actually build the water and sewer treatment plants. We actually adjudicate the water. We actually construct and operate all the infrastructure. And we do that for a period of time and then we turn it over to the city. But people don't realize, unless you're a developer, that California you could spend $125,000 to $225,000 per home just for fees. Not land, not improvements, not the house, not a more efficient way of building it. In Colorado, in the Denver metropolitan area, you could spend $125,000 to $175,000 per home. I just had a meeting 2 days ago with the state who was approving our wastewater treatment plant. And they asked a question separate from the treatment plant approval. How come you can't build lower cost housing? How much you make it? And I said, well, let's start with there's 65 municipalities in the Denver metropolitan area in 8 counties in a population of 4 million people. And you can spend $125,000 to $175,000 per unit just for fees. And they said, well, how can you build an inexpensive home? And I said, well, that's the point. You cannot. A great question. The issue is always, how does a city, this issue, when we say it's complex, it is complex. How does a city generate revenue? Whether it's through property taxes, obviously sales tax revenue is how a city really operates. How do you, as a developer, we have no incentive whatsoever to increase, monthly payments for our homeowners. None whatsoever. So we're always trying, so the way we handle it in our business is we look at a line item that most people ignore, which is, what is the infrastructure cost? And when I mean infrastructure, I mean water lines, sewer lines, water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, storm drainage. And we have what we call metropolitan districts. In Texas, they're called municipal utility districts. In California, called community facilities districts. We form those, we build them. Sight unseen, we can build them for about 60% of what any municipal jurisdiction in the Denver metro area can build them for. That is a very good way to save money to try to bring a more affordable, high-quality home, in addition to some of the other ideas you've already heard here. And further, last comment is, in Riverside, California, we do manufactured housing. And we have a project where people are buying 3 and 4 bedroom, single-story homes, and their monthly payment is between $3,000 to $3,500 a month for a 3 or 4 bedroom home. It can be done, and Marshall, you're right. This group has been doing this cumulatively for a century or more, and there's ways of doing it. It's not that easy.
Roger, would you like to add some thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, modular housing is long overdue. I mean, it's just, we're just very traditional, and we've looked at it, and a lot of publics have tried it, and it's just, it's due. And as soon as AI is implemented in home building, it'll happen. It's bound to happen. We are adding ADUs to our apartment communities, and you mentioned that, and that works for us. We actually we build them as ADUs and then convert it to leasing offices and some other creative things that we do. One of the things that as a company we do is multifamily for rent. We haven't really talked about that component, but that's very important to people. And we do that in an empire. And we also focus on active adult. You commented just briefly about that, but that's 55 plus. And it's very, very few services. In fact, the only service that we provide is cocktail hour on Tuesday. But there's a huge demand
I'm available
for it.
Tuesday.
But there's a huge demand for it. So we're very product driven. You use the word research. What will do well? And by the way, cities love active adult. Very little impact on services. Very little. Maybe there's an ambulance once in a while, but very little. And there's high demand for it. And by the way, rents can be higher than they are in conventional housing. So it's another component. The other comment I would make, and I'm surprised this hasn't happened, and I'm not sure it's due to regulation, but what happened to the condo conversion market? That was a huge market in Orange County in the 70s and the 80s. And I never heard any distress about that concept. But you take a 3-story, nicely built, maybe it's 20 years old, and you convert it to condos and you sell in Orange County, you sell it for $780,000. It is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. It's not the same as a traditional house, but what's important is home ownership. To have a home that you can paint as you'd like. You can wallpaper it. You don't have a rent increase. And there is a lot of value in having homeowners as neighbors.
I can answer that for Colorado.
Okay.
It's called construction defects litigation.
Okay. And that, by the way, was true why it halted, but that's not true today. I mean, now we have full access to condominium insurance. That is all come back. So that's just, and why it hasn't happened, I'm not sure why it hasn't, but I think some entrepreneurs will probably create it.
I'd be able
I think we have time for one more question from the audience. Go ahead.
I have a question. My question is in regards, just kind of like piggybacking off of the comment made about like not wanting NIMBYism, not wanting to house homeless individuals by like veterans housing. Like I wonder what your all thoughts are on the most and more ethical ways of building housing for the homeless and keeping the homeless housed. Thank you.
Should I?
Here we go.
You want it?
Go ahead. You do it, and then I'll follow right up.
In regards to the VA housing over in Westwood, so we're actually working with New Direction Vets and Hope the Mission. So those are the guys that did the tiny homes there. Our solution is we've converted a 2-bedroom modular into a 4-bedroom. And so instead of giving homeless people penthouses or building at $600,000 a door, We need to get it down to about $40,000 a bed or less.
Homeownership is extraordinarily important, and I've found in entitlements, in those 2,000 meetings, if there is a project that is some sort of goofy regulatory regime that no one can ever understand, everyone gets frustrated with it. If there is a way for some path or some other future to homeownership, all of those things make philosophical sense. Secondly, the other thing I've done in Colorado is I've entitled as many transitional housing projects for an organization that's solely focused on very troubled adolescents. One of the most difficult entitlement projects I've ever worked on in my career. I have found that neighborhoods, when you present the way that kind of project is run and how it integrates within the businesses and the homeowners, it works out quite well. They all exist today. They're some of the best contributors to a community. It is an important part of a community. A lot of it is roll your sleeves up, show up, and make some sense.
And just to add two quick points on this. There's a great book that came out several years back by a guy named Craig Colburn, who's a professor at the University of Washington, called Homelessness is a Housing Problem. And chapter by chapter, it addresses all of the things that people say cause homelessness: mental illness, drug addiction, et cetera, et cetera. And he goes issue by issue, tearing those arguments apart. He said, like, if mental illness or if drug addiction were the cause of homelessness, then West Virginia, which is the highest drug addiction rates in the country, would have the worst homeless problem, and they actually have barely any homelessness. If it was simply poverty that caused homelessness, then Louisiana would have the most homeless, and it doesn't really have that problem. And his point is clear that if we just build a lot of housing, we're going to reduce homelessness. So there's a tendency to want to build housing for the homeless as a solution. And we should do that. We must do that. But at the same time, building housing for everybody is by far the best prevention. Go ahead. You can clap if you want.
Let me turn it over to Wendell for some final thoughts there.
Yeah, let me just, there's been a lot of good discussion about the Inland Empire at this point, and I want to make sure you all are aware of the opportunities there. It used to be there was a place called San Francisco that was the second largest metropolitan area in the state. No longer. The second largest metropolitan area in the state is called Riverside, San Bernardino. You take San Bernardino and Riverside counties combined, they have a land area similar to that of Austria. And it's not terribly full. I mean, I realize there's real urbanization west of Beaumont and so on, but the fact is there's plenty of room to build. And that's where we need to be building. That's where prices are best and so on. And the sad thing about it is that, you go to Victorville, we're looking at situations where housing is costing unbelievable amounts of money, largely because we're over-regulating the periphery. So I just want to make sure that we're thinking along those lines.
Well, Wendell, thank you. Panelists, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for your insights. Audience, great questions. We've reached the end of our time, and I want to thank you all for being here on behalf of USC Kasdan Institute and the School of Real Estate at Chapman University. We look forward to keeping this dialogue going and having you around. Come join us for a future event. Thank you so much.
Great presentation. I had not